Subscribe now and I'll love you forever. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Okay, so the question that everybody's been asking since the event ended last Tuesday, which iPhone should you get? Or should you even upgrade? So, I've been using the 12 Pro Max for almost a year now, since I pre-ordered them last year when it came out. And I'm definitely not pre-ordering the 13 Pro Max, even though I would love to get one and try it out, even though I said I wasn't going to get one. It's just, I love it. In this video, I'm just going to break down what I think. What phone should you get? What phone should you have to stay with the phone you currently have and wait for the 14 or even the 15? If you're ready, let's get into it. Okay, first off, I love this feature on the Apple Store app. Compare iPhones. So I have the 13 Pro Max and the 12 Pro Max chosen right there. And it just gives me a side-by-side comparison for everything. So we're just going to kind of go through this. Display. The displays are exactly the same. 6.7 inches on both. The only difference is the 13 has a little bit tiny smaller notch. 20% smaller notch. And so that's okay. And then the big thing, Pro Motion. 120 Hz display. I love 120 Hz display. I don't know if you guys know what 120 Hz is, but if you do and you've seen it before, there is no going back to 60 Hz once you've had 120 Hz. It's definitely not worth $1,000 for 120 Hz for me, but my goodness, it's worth it. I love 120 Hz. It's beautiful. So moving on, both have 5G cellular. They both have a wide, ultra-wide telephoto camera, except the camera specs are a little bit different, which we'll get into a little bit later in the video. But they both have the same cameras, just of course the 13 has better versions of that camera. And then they have a cinematic mode, which is capped at 1080p at 30 frames per second. But it's really cool. Rack focus. I'm not a videographer, so I can't really explain what that means as good as others can. But essentially, if you watch the Apple event, I think they nailed it in their description of it. It's just focus mode for video. That's pretty much it. Portrait mode for video. Okay, they have the LiDAR scanner, which is exactly the same. Great for night shots, portraits, faster autofocus, and low light, blah, blah, blah. LiDAR scanner, exactly the same on both models. It has the A15 Bionic chip on the 13, which Apple did not compare to the A14 in the event, meaning probably that there's not a big difference between the two. Not surprised. A14, A15, I don't think that is going to be something that matters whenever you're switching between those two phones. Now, if you hadn't guessed yet, I'm comparing 12 Pro Max and 13 Pro Max because I have the 12 Pro Max. Based on what you've seen so far, do you think it's worth upgrading from the 12 Pro Max to the 13 Pro Max? I don't know if you've noticed thus far, but all of the changes have been incremental. So between the 12 mini and the 13 mini, incremental changes. Between the 12 and the 13, incremental changes. 12 Pro, 13 Pro, incremental changes. 13 Pro Max, 12 Pro Max, incremental changes. But are these incremental changes enough to justify it for you? Is it enough to justify the money? If the money is no option, sure. But if money is a concern, like it is for most people, then I don't know. I'm curious to know what you guys think. Here's where we get into some of the juicy stuff. Battery life. Battery life on the 12 Pro Max is great. It says here it lasts up to 20 hours of video playback. I don't know how true that is. I haven't done a battery test myself. But I do know that it's not even 1 o'clock right now. And my phone is at 50% because I've been listening to Harry Potter audiobook all day. I've watched YouTube videos on my phone this morning. And I have been playing some Pokemon Go a little bit today when I had a chance. And now my phone's at 50%. But with the 13 Pro Max, 28 hours of video playback. So my phone would be at 70, 80% if I had the 13 Pro Max. And I had the exact same usage as I did today on my 12 Pro Max. That's really cool. I think that's fantastic. Is that worth it? Possibly. So as Apple put it, the 13 Pro Max has 2.5 hours more battery life than the 12 Pro Max did. So I think that's really cool, and I think that might be worth it. Let me know what you guys think, though. Durability is exactly the same. Colors are a little bit different. Are colors something that would be worth changing for you? Because that Sierra Blue is tempting. Like, Sierra Blue, cinematic video, and promotion, and the better battery life, might just be enough for me to say, you know what, screw everything I've said in the past. I want this 13 Pro Max. Because that Sierra Blue is just what I've always wanted on an iPhone. I love that color. The fact that they brought it to the Pro model and not the basic models just makes me so happy. So into some of the more technical specs, the pixel resolution is exactly the same, and then both have True Tone, they both have the wide color display, but the 13 Pro Max gets up to 1,000 nits of brightness, whereas the 12 Pro Max is only 800 nits of brightness, and they both cap out at 1,200 nits of brightness for HDR content. Essentially, when you're in the sunlight, the 1,000 nits is going to be a little bit better to see, easier to see than the 800 nits on the 12 Pro Max. Is it that big of a difference for you to even notice? I honestly doubt it, but whatever. It'd be something I'd have to see and try hand in hand in a bright sunny day with both phones in my hand. But both phones have ceramic shield, they both have the matte glass on the back, and they both have the stainless steel rims around it, exactly the same. Both have lightning port, but the 13 is a little bit heavier and a little bit wider, possibly to accommodate for the bigger battery, but I really don't mind. It's not that much heavier. It goes from 8.03 ounces to 8.46 ounces, and the depth goes from 0.29 inches, or 7.4 millimeters, to 0.30 inches, which is 7.65 millimeters. So that is not a huge difference, right? So I'm really excited to try it out. I think the heavier is just going to make it feel more premium. I never thought the 12 Pro Max was too heavy, but hey, whatever. Okay, so lastly, we are going to go into the newer camera specs. Okay, so like I said, both phones have a telephoto wide and ultra-wide angle lens, but instead of having the f2.4 aperture ultra-wide, this year they have f1.8. Again, I don't know the specifics of what all of these things mean. I am still new to YouTube, but I'm also not big into camera stuff, but all I know, much better low light performance. The ultra-wide camera does not get as grainy as quick, meaning awesome, because I love the ultra-wide camera on my phone, the 12 Pro Max, but it gets grainy pretty quick. So that's why I really don't use it for any YouTube videos, and I'd love to have an ultra-wide lens to use on my main camera, on the main wide-angle lens, but I'm not spending that money. Then, the wide-angle f1.6 aperture is now f1.5. Again, I assume that it brings in more light, better camera. Same thing with the telephoto, f2.8 instead of f2.2. The optical zoom is going from 2.5 optical zoom and 5 optical zoom range to... oh, hi. Sir. Cats. Okay. So it goes from 2.5 optical zoom in the 12 Pro Max to 3 optical zoom in the 13. 2 optical zoom out, 2 times optical zoom out, both models. 6 times optical zoom range, as opposed to last year's, which had the 5 times optical zoom range. And digital zoom, instead of 12 times, it goes all the way up to 15 times, which I think is beautiful, I think is awesome. I really like all 3 cameras. I love how much you can zoom in. It's fantastic. You know, those lens cases you can get for your phone, which I made a review on recently. They're not great. Imagine having that, just your phone built in. And that's kind of what the 13 Pro Max has. Because not only do they have all that, the ultra-wide camera is a 2-in-1. You can also do macro shots. Up to 2 centimeters away, it does macro shots. It doesn't need that little janky 2 millimeter. Did I really say millimeter? 2 megapixel camera on the Samsung phones that do macro. No, it is built into the ultra-wide camera on your iPhone 13 Pro Max. I wish my 12 Pro Max had that. I think that is so cool. It's just built in. So instead of having 4 cameras, even though it technically has 4 cameras, it's all built in to 1 camera, meaning it has only 3 cameras. If that made any sense to anyone at all. Again, I talked about cinematic mode, and it also does a new thing, ProRes video. So last year, Apple introduced Apple Pro Raw, and that is essentially the same thing, but for video. Much better video quality, but that's only if you have the 128 gig iPhone 13, then that is capped to 1080p because it takes up a lot of storage. Smart HDR support 4 versus HDR3 and photographic styles. Essentially, if you take a picture with your phone and you choose you change the brightness a little bit, you change some of the warmth, the vignettes, you change something, you change these things, and then with photographic styles, you can essentially save that. So the next time you take a photo, it automatically applies that to the photo you just took because that is what you want. That is what the phone assumes you want now. And you can choose that. It's really cool. From what I've seen also, the front cameras are pretty much exactly the same. You can now record at 4K 60 HDR on the front camera instead of 4K 30, which on the 12 Pro Max you could do. And aside from the photographic styles on the front camera, the front camera is exactly the same. So those are all the differences between the 12 Pro Max and the 13 Pro Max. And because these are highest model phones. Now take those two differences and bring it down for the 13 Pro and the 12 Pro. And then bring them down a little bit more to the 12 and 13, even more mini, 13 mini, if that makes sense. These phones are not too different, but they might just be different enough for certain people. Like, if you currently have a 12 Pro Max, if it's in great condition, fully paid off, Apple will give you $729 for it. And then you can put that towards your 13 Pro Max, which then makes the phone only like $300. Even better, if you had the 12 Pro Max last year and this year for some reason you want the smaller phone, so they'll still give you $729 for it. And you can pay even less for like $200 for the 13 Pro instead of the Pro Max. So that's really cool. If that is worth the extra couple $100 for you, because you don't have to go through the whole deal of selling it and stuff. Apple is doing some really crazy trade-in values this year, and carriers are doing some pretty cool values too. I guess they're really trying to sell these phones, maybe because they know they're not that different. But as you've seen in a video prior that I've made, the iPhone 14s are going to be insane. So let me know in the comments what you guys think and what you guys are going to actually do down below. Until then, I'm Jake. This is Shot on My Phone.